Race is an organization. It's a movement. We're talking about unity. We're talking about unity. So we're aimed to taking down the system of race by educating, enlightening, informing, and positively debating with those who have counterviews.
Richard, your friendly host. Welcome to the show.
Hey, and I'm Carla, and I want to welcome you also to talk about unity. It's great to be here today. Man, look at that outstanding background. We got the greatest crew here. Vince made this outstanding background. E.R.A.S.E. We're making it happen today. So we want to welcome y'all to the show.
Man, we got a great show lined up today. I'm telling you, we are going to talk about some stuff. My wife tells me this, Carla. If you can talk about everything, you can get through anything.
Yeah.
There's those can't go there places, and that really messes you up. But you've learned this in family.
You've
learned this in relationship.
I learned that
we enjoyed some of this back and forth. But if you could talk about everything, you can get through anything. And I enjoy the passionate discussions family has. Right?
Yeah, and we had a passionate one a couple of weeks ago. My brother was in the studio. We're trying to get him back. Everybody wants him back. They said that was our best show because we yelled at each other and everybody was getting used to that fighting thing happening. But so we'll have him back and we're gonna have an adult conversation next time. Okay, so y'all stand by for that.
I'm trying to get it to where it's a show discussion banter / wrestling match.
Yeah, and that's the thing. See, what people don't know, we didn't have Richard here because that's another dynamic. All right, and people say, well, it might be another dynamic just because of skin color. No, but it's the relationship thing that you'll see has nothing to do with color when we start that whole thing going back and forth. And that's the thing. There would be things going all kinds of directions because with him and me, it's just back going this way. Yeah. You in there, things are just bouncing off the wall. Yeah, it's going to be crazy next time.
And Dwayne and I have a long-standing relationship. I mean, it's not a love-hate. It's a love, don't really quite get you relationship.
Well, that's the cool thing, though. That at the end of the day, all this stuff is about relationship. I was talking to the crew here, Dakota and Vince. I was telling them that at the end of the day, almost every one of these situations you have, even in our country, when it went from the top to the bottom, whether it's political candidates, whether it's people working in schools, businesses, companies, whatever, there's that relationship factor that makes a difference. And that's why we come on here and we say, we've got to talk about unity, because if you don't articulate that, if you don't talk about that with other people so they understand that at the end of the day, you and I, we've got to make a connection and we're going to go forward, then you'll end up with kind of what we got in our country. We've got a lot of people who are disconnected from the others that we don't decide to walk forward together. So we're talking about unity.
Talk it out, walk it out, and if you stay at it long enough, you're going to form a relationship, and then that leads into trust and respect and a fruitful, productive, not only relationship in life, but a society. If we model it for other people that haven't been able to do it, success leaves clues. Yeah. And so the more we do that together, the better it is. Proximity, and we'll talk about this at the end of the show. Proximity is the bedrock for relationship. Yeah. And if we can just get together and just have conversations, what we need to do sometime. And we're just thinking, just indulge me for a second. What I would like to do is I want to ask the questions without repercussions that I've always had about the way you see things differently than I do.
Yeah, we really do.
And you can, I'm not going to you can ask me any question about my culture, my history, and just back and forth. Because you know what? We might be surprised at the answers. I have no idea why that's that way. So anyway, I'd love to do it.
Well, but the thing is, what that does is it opens up dialogue. I mean, it allows you to have conversations. Right. On the show before where have Tennille's touchy subjects. We're talking about and there's really so much of what we say is a touchy subject, and so we don't bring it up. There are things that you would never bring up in a community of us because we're different than you, and so you wouldn't bring it up. Right. But we need to be able to talk about that. And that's why on Talk About Unity, we try to say, hey, we got to get to the point where we can actually dialogue. So in our show today, the basics of our show today is called Race, what it is and why it is. Because I don't think a lot of people really understand how we got here. And they don't understand why we got here. And so we're going to talk about that, explore that, so that we can all come with a better foundation, so that we can have these discussions. All right, but before we get to that and get to our really show content, we want to talk about some of the current issues that are happening out there, Richard. We you know, all the stuff that's happening in our country. What's going on?
There's some stuff that is just popping this morning, and of course, you know, and my wife throws me things. How did you hear about this today? And then what's the saying? Consider the source. So there's some new social media platforms. There's some old historical social media platforms, but some stuff came across a few social media platforms this morning about, and this came from Kayleigh McEnany, which you know is President Trump's spokesperson, press secretary, and said that Texas, which is
our state,
filed charges in federal court against Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and the other, was it 3 or 4 other states that are having election irregularities?
And Georgia one of them?
Yes. So election irregularities, and so this gives them legal standing, so they say. But okay, so the basic premise is, okay, Texas went for President Trump, and these other states, if counting everything the way it is right now, if nothing changes, so these states are going to go towards President-elect Biden, and that means Texas, who they voted for, is going to not win, so they feel disenfranchised because of these other states' irregularities, and so now it gives them a direct path to the Supreme Court if they aren't granted a voice in these states, or any actions taken in these states. So it's a slippery slope. And so if you studied United States history, we know that Texas, here's the slippery slope. Texas is the only state before they came into the Union that had the agreements that if they wanted to, voted for, to succeed from the Union with, I guess there would still be repercussions, but to succeed from the United States, which means Texas leaves the United States. It's actually in the Texas Constitution and the agreement with the United States to succeed from the Union. A lot of people have said that forever. Texas, needs to be its own country, right? But this could really muddy the waters for quite some time. I think it's a scary time.
And now I'm going to invoke my my wife's legal knowledge as an attorney.
Sure.
So the question is, it'll be on standing. That's the term that's used to determine whether or not Texas is legitimate and they have a voice in this actual in the complaint that they're filing. And so it's hard to believe that they would give them standing because of your sovereignty as Texas, and you are responsible only for Texas. And they're saying your feelings or your decisions are not changed by the fact that these other states did something, whether it's improper or not, whatever. So I don't know, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out when it gets to that level. But I would think that standing would be the issue, and that they would find out that Texas doesn't have standing. It sounds crazy, but I don't know. So, but on the other side of that, what is your general thought about the election that never ends? I mean, what do you think? What do you think, objectively speaking? Where do you think we're going to go, and what do you think we should go?
Okay, so number one, I think the whole world is looking at the United States and they like, look at these crazy kids fight. I guess they're never going to stop. Okay, so what I think needs to happen is there needs to be some standardization of our election process across all 50 states. And of course, here's states' rights.
What do you mean when you say standardization of it?
Okay, so what I would like is that, and that's process engineering, right? So,
right.
So what I think needs to happen is there needs to be one type of system in which people vote. Here's what I think: vote in person only, unless you can't be there. And of course, we know absentee ballots have worked in the past because there's IDs and things like that. So vote in person only, with very few exceptions, with a valid ID. And I think everybody needs a free, and I'll gladly pay a little extra taxes for this, voter ID card that is encrypted. So when you vote, it kicks you out, you can't vote again. If you die, you can't vote. No more dead people vote. If you move, then the system knows, and it goes to your encrypted ID card, that if you move, you can't vote in your own district anymore. So you can only vote once, and once you vote, you're kicked out, and if you die, you're kicked out of the system. Which really just, if there is, I mean, some people saying there is no voter fraud. There is none of that going on. And then there's people saying yes, there is. You know what it does? It just solves it solves the whole issue. And we would know at the end of the day. I mean, if they can get American Idol.
Well, that's the point. Why do you think we don't have that? I mean, we're technology leaders. Why don't we have that? How can we not have this?
Yeah.
This seems like a simple thing in comparison to what Steve Jobs and Bill Gates had created, and you know.
I just don't want anyone disenfranchised regarding their vote. Everybody's vote. This is one of the most important rights of every United States citizen, and I just really want everybody's vote to count. No more, no less. It's all the same. And with all of these, hopefully they're not made up, but it could be people making up videos or stuff, and then all of a sudden, because really it's the elements. Ashland's political science professor said that this is the elements that create civil war, or at least severe civil unrest. When you feel like your vote was stolen, then all of a sudden we have a mess. So we need to fix that.
Yeah. So, all right. So good on that. All right. Let's talk pandemic. What's going on with the pandemic? What's happening across the country? I just noticed California is going on lockdown once again. I also saw where many of the restaurant owners and some of the people in California are standing up and saying, "I'm not closing." And so you get and you talk about the elements of civil war, because these restaurant owners are very upset and they're saying, "No, I'm not going to comply anymore." They talked about how they shut down previously when Governor Newsom in California told them to shut down for 2 months, and they said no. And and I heard one of the interviewers asking and said, "Well, what if they pass a stimulus?" And there was one owner of the restaurant said, "I don't want them giving me money. I want to earn my own way."
Right.
I was like, "No, that's pretty cool.
Right.
That's pretty cool." But what do you think about that whole thing? I mean, the lockdowns. What do you think we're going to happen in Texas? No lockdown?
Our governor said no more lockdowns.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. We're actually, if you look at the data, Texas is doing pretty good. There are some states that have some severe problems, and the problem is, like in New York, he said if the number goes to 5%, then restaurants are going to be shut down. Well, a lot of the medical community has recently come out and said, if you really want to look at where people are, because they do contract tracing, and they kind of go and investigate how did this happen, and what was the travel history around your family getting infested with corona, they found out that the highest percentage of where people get infected is in their home. So how do you control that? I mean, everybody gets an ankle bracelet and has to stay in the room. I don't know, that's silly, right? Yeah. But restaurants is really a small limit. You compare restaurants, which was between 3 and 5%, compared to malls, which is 9%. So it makes more sense to lock down a mall than it does a restaurant. But there's a lot of hypocrisy in the whole restaurant lockdown. In California, the governor shuts down this lady's restaurant, and she spent all this capital building outdoor dining, and then 50 feet away, the governor says, "You can't shut down, please shut her down." And then 50 feet away, they opened up a movie set catering restaurant, and they're feeding them all in close proximity, not even socially distanced. But they opened that up to them, but wouldn't let her, and she lost her mind. It's gone viral on the internet. So
I saw, Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary.
Yeah,
I saw him going off. I saw him going off on about some of the contradictions, and so there are tons of contradictions on this whole thing. So that's going to be. And so, so before we go to break, let's talk about vaccines. What do you think about vaccines? You gonna take it? Is it going to work?
Hey,
what do you think?
The good news is I got corona, and I got my antibodies. I got my antibodies. I got my negative, and so no. I
still tell him, don't breathe on me. Don't breathe on me.
Oh, my daughter just got it.
Oh, really?
They all got it except Amy, and she's like living in the tower of the castle, right? She's not doing anything with anybody.
Oh, all right.
So,
hey, well, cool. So y'all think about that. Hey, we're gonna take a break here. When we come back, remember the topic of our show today is what it is, race, and why it is race. So we're little education. Hey, go get your Google out, go get your dictionary, go get your knowledge.
Take some notes.
And if nothing else, just listen, because we got a lot of information we're going to drop on you today, right after this break on Talk About Unity.
That's good.
Five, four, three, two, one, zero, ignition, liftoff.
Don't push me because I'm close to the edge.
I'm trying not to lose my head.
Hey, this is the Talk About Unity show where I bring the talk.
And I bring the unity.
And together we talk about unity. Unity is what matters.
Come on.
And right now in our country, that's what we've got to do. So we do that here at Talk About Unity on the Edge Radio Network. Be with us every week.
It's going to be awesome. It always is. And I tell you what, the more we seek first to understand, then be understood, we make progress.
And we like to do that. And that's why everybody's on the brink. We love what we do at Edge Radio because everybody's on the edge. We bring them back from the edge and we bring the unity. So we're just glad to Edge Radio Network every Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Talk About Unity because here at Edge Radio Network, truth still matters. Hey, we want to welcome you back to Talk About Unity. And as you see, our subject matter today is all about race, what it is and why it is. I think there's a lot of ignorance that happens out there on what race really is about. And I think we're born into this thing, but then we never ask any questions about it. So all your questions will be answered today as we define what race is and why race is. And so let's get right into it because this is going to be one of those shows where we're going to need time for you to digest the information. So let's get in and begin to talk about it. All right, this thing called race.
Yeah, okay, so race is a classification of people that is not based on any real or accurate biological or scientific truth, but instead on physical characteristics, specifically skin color.
All right, so let's talk about that. All right, so the fact that when we talk about race not being biological or scientific means there's nothing that differentiates me from Richard other than the fact that what you see externally, our physical characteristic, skin color, you would say we're different. Now, in our history, many people have said that, well, no, there's a thing, black people are different than white people. And there have been people, and we'll cover this in some of our discussion today, we'll talk about how we got to that point, but some people actually believe that there are these scientifically physiological differences in us, and they talked about, black people are closer to the apes or things like that, and so they're saying there's something in our human makeup that differentiates us, but the science, and I tell you what, this is the most amazing thing. They had this thing called the Human Genome Project in 2003, just amazing. Blew all that stuff out of the water. Things that people who had been saying this stuff in the 18th and 19th century, I'm talking about the good guys who had been saying, no, there's only one race, the human race. Right. Some people who had been saying that got it verified, while at the same time you had people in the 18th and 19th century on the other side of that. So So let's continue on and let's go with the second point.
Okay, so race is a social political construction. A social political construction is something created by people. This is not a natural development, is constructed or created for a social and political purpose.
Yeah, and that's what we've done with race.
Yeah.
So those who are proponents of race and support race have to understand that it is in fact something that we human beings we made up. Now, that being said, everything that human beings made up, and this is what people who defend race would say, is like, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not good or it's not real. That's true. That's true. However, we got the other side of that argument, and we're going to show you some stuff and show you why it is a bad thing. So, yeah, you're right. It's a social construction. It was made up. It's kind of like the stop signs. Stop signs were a construction. You know,
Yeah.
they have a purpose, all right? And they're not the same in all countries. They have different methods of stop, yield, or whatever. So we would say that that has a very practical benefit and it's good. We would call that a very good construction, social construct. All right. However, race is got a lot of downsides, and we'll talk about that later. So understand that it is something, in fact, that we made up. You won't find race in the Bible. You won't find that anywhere else. You won't find it in anything solid. It's something that we made up. And here's the thing you really need to know, and you'll see this when we cover the history, is that it is really very recent in history. When you talk about terms of history being the world being thousands of years old, we're talking about in the last 200, 300 years did this race concept come up. Okay, so let's go on.
So the concept of race was created as a classification of human beings with the purpose of giving power to white people and to legitimize the dominance of white people over non-white people.
Now, when we talk about race this way, you're actually, when you use those terms, of course, white people, non-white people, black people, then you've got to understand, first of all, that you've already subscribed to the concept. And so when we got to understand that the fact that we use race and in this sense means you start from the point of, okay, I believe that there's such a thing as black people, white people. So that's the first thing. That's why it's often difficult when I have conversations with people, because I tell them, well, let's start at step one rather than step two, because in step two, it's a given that race exists. All right. And so this statement then basically says that in the race concept, then it was done for this purpose. And this is the killer question when I have people who believe that race is okay. I ask them, all right, if you understood and if you believe this, and right now we're going to prove it to you before the show's over, but right now I'm going to ask you if you believe this. If you believe that race was created for white people to have dominance and subjugate another group of people that were not white, would you still want to keep it? You know, so knowing that, and I'm telling you that is why it was created. So the question is, for those who believe in, like, yeah, but now, because I understand people now, I'm black and I'm proud, I understand that. But what I'm saying, if you knew that it was created so that they could do that and subjugate you, that they created and said, we're going to make them non-white and eventually black, make them black, we'll be white, we'll be at the top, would you still do it? And so it'd be interesting to find out what people actually thought about that now.
You know, this is what's happened in the last 300, 400 years, 500 years, as a political position and a cultural position of dominance. But you know, if you go back, of course, you know, what I do for a living. I'm a pastor, and I dig down into the Word of God, but into history. Mm-hmm. And you know, this whole dominance of based on race, that was in Egypt. That was all throughout the conquering of lands and tribes and kingdoms, but the one issue that is a reoccurring thing is to dehumanize the ones that they are conquering. And that's some of what we're going to get into as well. Sorry, just wanted to
that's a very good point, because when you think about it, and here's the thing, I've got a friend who lives in France. His name is Miguel Guerra, and he opens up my mind to something much bigger than this concept of race, because he's got it from a world history viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And when we start talking about things that happen to people based on skin color, he brings in stuff that happened in Spain and Portugal and other places around the world, and he puts it in the context of how that is symbolic of kind of same stuff that happened in America, but we only see it in the thing of skin color.
Sure.
And it's so much bigger than that if we can really open our minds. And I keep telling him I'm going to have him on the show. We're going to have the Miguel Guerra show, because he's just amazing in his knowledge of world history pertaining to these things. So one of the big questions people have is always, well, what's the difference between race and ethnicity? And so let's look at this, and on this slide we've got here, and it kind of identifies and makes it kind of clear. So
Sure. So many people like to make ethnic distinctions as well as national distinctions to hold on to their ethnic culture and identity. So there's Italian American, people use that phrase, which is basically ethnicity is Italian and the nationality is U.S. American. And then there's Mexican-American, the ethnicity is Mexican and nationality is United States American. And then there's Chinese American, ethnicity is Chinese and nationality is U.S. American. And of course, African American. And the
ethnicity is supposed to be is African.
This ethnicity is supposed to be African, but the nationality
on the screen it says Chinese, but they meant African. All right, so it should be African. But here's the kicker on that thing. Yeah, so that's a mistake. So that's ethnicity is not Chinese for African Americans, by the way. All right, but here's the.
I thought I was going to learn something new.
No, we got that messed up. Too many typos. My editing crew have to get on it. All right, but here's the thing with this whole thing about ethnicity, race and ethnicity, and people try to use them interchangeably, but you really can't. The Genome Project, which fomented all of the DNA things like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, makes this whole thing a whole lot more, not necessarily complex, but actually simplified, because what it does is it identifies that while I've done my DNA, and I'm from Nigeria, West African, Nigeria, but I've also got 16% European, I got 1.2% or something Asian. So all these things are parts of our makeup, and we all mixed up that way, And what's the most amazing thing, I said, if you go far enough back, some of those people who call themselves Ku Klux Klan, whatever, they find that they got some African. They've got some African. It might be a very small percentage, but if you go far enough back, because the original man was found there in Africa, and so this ethnicity thing is in fact true, because it just simply breaks down what are all those mixed parts of our origins, and those origins, of course, stem from people who are located in various places around the globe. And so we're really, at this point, all kind of mixed up in the world, which is really cool, because the more people, and this is what's so cool, with that DNA and all that stuff, go search your DNA. If you really go back and begin to research and find out your family history and begin to trace back, man, it will just take you to so many parts of the world, and you would then realize that, yeah, we're humans. And we're humans.
Well, knowledge is power. It really is. And, the more people become aware of actually who they are through the genome or ancestry, then all of a sudden the light goes off and you say, if this is superior, if this race is superior and this race is inferior, then I have an inner conflict inside of me that I can't resolve. And so you lose those arguments, because you realize you are you, not based on a label. You're you based on, your experiences and what God did, brought you about and put you in the family. He knew what he was doing when he put us where he put us. Anyway, I'm not going to preach today, but the whole concept is,
and
these labels are ridiculous.
And so the question that it begs the question, then, if you've got race and ethnicity, then why do you use race? Then why not use ethnicity? And of course, I guess the answer would be because even if you use ethnicity, then people who are quote unquote mixed race, which one do they choose? Especially when you've got a parent who's of this and a different parent who's of that, which one do you say that you are? Now, the crazy stuff that happened, of course, in slavery, the one drop rule and things like that already said if you got one drop, then you're automatically all over there. So that's crazy. And so that's why even to talk about ethnicity, you got to define these things pretty well. And so there's race versus ethnicity. But let's talk about why race is really such a bad thing. So on the next slide, you'll see that race is really a bad thing. Read that to us there, Bridget.
Sure. So the concept race is based on socially constructed, but not just socially constructed, but socially, certainly scientifically outmoded beliefs about the inherent superiority and inferiority of groups based on racial distinctions.
Wow. And so think about that. All right. So this is very educational. Think about that. Because it's socially constructed, what it's saying is we've now put in place a system where people are inherently